get yourselves a cup of tea and a biscuit. You'll see that your representatives on the panel this evening include me and James and Tatiana. They'll introduce themselves in due course. But William, if it looks like everyone's broadly here, I suggest we get started. Just let me know if that's the case.
Yep, I think let's go.
Good. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, for giving up your sunny, rainy, whatever it is, Wednesday evening. I'm Simon Pitt-Keithley. I shall be chairing events this evening. I imagine a few of you have kind of been to the previous version of this or have got some understanding of the Highline. But for those that don't know, I am normally the chief exec of the Camden Highline. I also run the business improvement district Camden Town Unlimited and the charity Camden Collective, which is currently based in Buck Street in Camden Town, if you know it. We at Camden Town Unlimited have been working on the amazing Park in the Sky project since about 2017. And we're really excited to be able to show you the work that's progressed to date that James and Tatiana have been. I haven't done any of the work, frankly. They do all the actual work. What's I think really interesting is that they are starting to pull this together based on the feedback that people like you have been giving us. And we'll continue to seek that this evening. So there's a chat function here. You can post your questions all throughout the evening. We can see them, so try and be polite. But you can also email them later on to info@camdenhighline.com. We'll try and put that email address in the chat as well if you want to pick it up for later. It would be wrong of me to let this moment pass without reminding us all that we are fundraising for the construction. We've raised over £1 million so far. That's got us as far as we are now and will get us through to planning, but we still need to raise the money to build it. That includes donations of all kinds. I remind you all that you can, for £30, get yourself a beautiful set of Camden Highline postcards, and for £80 you can get the highly sought after fashion item that is the Camden Highline tote bag. I was stopped in the street the other day. Someone asked me where I got mine. I thought they were, stopping me to admire something that I'd done or said, but no, it was my tote bag. We're especially interested, though, at that sort of top end of the sort of fundraising spectrum, and you out there may well know people who are involved in corporate sponsorship or things like that, who have access to sort of networks of high net worth individuals, to people who are trustees of trusts and foundations. We've got a kind of series of tranches that we look to raise the full amount from for that construction. So please don't be shy. I think we've had all the advice we can get about fundraising. What we really need are those contacts and access to networks. So if you know anyone like that, please do reach out and make time for us. As I said, we started this in 2017. We've had loads and loads of feedback along the way. We've had 1,500 people go on walks. I'm sure that includes some of you here this evening. We've done 1,000 hours with school kids. We've got 300 friends of the Highline and Street Space who are part of the team that James put together with Tatiana, are out doing lemonade stands and things like that in places like Maiden Lane as we speak. We know the site is constrained. There are things we just can't do because there's railways and infrastructure and it's on a viaduct and all sorts of things in the way. But that doesn't mean that people can't have great ideas for how this might evolve that we haven't thought of. So please do put stuff in the chat. Let us know about what your thoughts are. We will finish this exercise now that James and his team are doing by Christmas, hopefully, and that will involve submitting the planning application. Yes, we've got lots of support from the Mayor of London, from Camden Council, from all of you. The support is amazing, but we still got to go through the rigors of planning, as you would expect. And that could take time because these things do, as some of you I'm sure will know. But we would hope that certainly by this time next year, or maybe a bit earlier, we'd have that finished planning permission for the finalised design, and we could start building if we had the money. Construction probably take 18 months, 2 years. So I'm sort of thinking we could have this open in 2024, and that feels doable with a fair wind, and particularly if we find more of those people who can help us fundraise for the construction. We also included in our big money to raise to build it, we want to raise an endowment so that we can buy an asset that will fund the maintenance in perpetuity. We want it to be amazing when it opens, and we want it to stay amazing forever. So that's enough from me. I'll take your questions at the end and put them to the guys here, but now is the time to hear from the people who really know what they're talking about. James, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, we should. Is that looking good? Full screen? Okay, so with our local partner, Tatiana, and vPPR Architects, we are very happy to and excited to share with you the work to date. This work is evolving. It's work in progress. We have some pretty strong ideas, which we hope will build excitement. And but we're really sharing this with you now to get your input and your feedback. We'd like to hear the sort of things that really excite you, that you'd like to see more of, as well as maybe some things that maybe you're not so keen about, and so that we can continue to evolve the design. The first 5 or 10 minutes are really will go very, very quickly. These are important things to just touch on to contextualize the design work. And then the really exciting part will follow. Of course, the Camden Highline is this raised viaduct running east-west through Camden. Our client is the Camden Highline Group and Camden Town Unlimited. There's a number of primary stakeholders that need to review our work in progress and approve it, including Network Rail, Transport for London, Camden Planning. And there's a good number of community stakeholders, charities, businesses, resident groups, local organizations, and event groups that we have reached out to. And of particular importance has been the communities surrounding the Highline. This work began before we were commissioned. Simon and William and his team have been long at it, trying to engage interest, build support, inform people about the possibilities, and get community ideas to sort of inspire the work as it develops, including working with school groups and with members of the community here, doing some work at Camden Gardens. More recently, we too, working with our consultant in London, Street Space, a very big effort really to try to reach out to communities throughout Camden, including Agor Grove Estate and the Maiden Lane Estates, informing people about the possibilities, inviting them for their own ideas and their own input. These are some images from a cleaning operation of the Green Street Bridge a few weeks ago. And what we're hearing almost consistently is that people are very excited about the project. There's lots of aspirations. People would like to see greenery, nature, a sense of the wild, a place to stroll and relax, a place for children, not only for play, but also for education, seating, places to sit, to actually work with the fact that trains are passing by, train watching, and look for opportunities for art and for connections. We're also hearing concerns. There's a lot of concern about security, safety, graffiti, vandalism, lighting. Will it be safely lit without being overlit? Accessibility, how accessible will the Highline be? What are its operating hours? And certain neighbors wanting to be assured that they will retain their privacy. These are all a number of issues that have gone into our thinking as we share with you the design. A second thing that's gone into our thinking is just Camden Town itself. I think we spoke about this in the first town hall, the sort of character of Camden, its eclecticism, its fringe-like quality, its robust and vibrant street life. The fact that we have the roundhouse, the market, the canal, a variety of spaces and places that make Camden what it is. The vibrancy of street art and the arts and cultural dimensions of the town. We have Camden Gardens, but we've heard from residents that they would love to see more greenery and have more access to nature, not only for respite, but also for gardening and for being active in green ecological environments. The viaduct itself has also informed our work. The viaduct historically has been important in terms of connecting various parts of London, but also more broadly the country. This is a photograph from 1957. You see Camden Gardens is in the top, St. Pancras Way towards the bottom, cutting through the fabric. Another photograph here from the same time, focused on Camden Gardens, Kentish Town Road and Camden Street flanking the gardens, moving north into Kentish Town. And today, much greener environment, more trees and parks. You can see Camden Gardens in the lower portion of this slide. The canal is on the right. And as you move east towards Camley Street and finally to York Way and King's Cross. This aerial photograph is looking west. You've got Royal College Street and Camden Road in the sort of middle foreground, and Camden Road Station just beyond. Camden Gardens is beyond that. This photograph is looking east, basically the bridge here over Randolph Street in the lower foreground, over St. Pancras Way in the middle. Looking west, you see St. Pancras Bridge, Randolph Street Bridge, moving across Camden Road towards Camden Gardens in the distant background there. And looking west, a little further back from the Maiden Lane estate, looking towards Agar Grove and further west beyond. The character of the viaduct is mostly masonry with a number of arches. These arches are kind of interesting when you discover them and you're able to pass through them. There's also a number of steel bridges that cross streets at significant locations and become iconic in their own right. Certainly they are place-making markers. This is Simon with a tour underneath the St. Pancras Bridge, just a curious structure. And some just charming characteristics in terms of this weathering ruin in the sky with glimpses to the street below, and this dialogue really between street level life and life on the High Line itself. The top side is characterized by trains, the train line. Historically, there were multiple lines up here. Today, the lines tend to trundle along, and they have an interesting relationship to you as you are walking alongside them. This is a photograph over the St. Pancras Way Bridge. You can see the open structure, the train line next door, and just typically what is characteristic of the High Line today, overgrown with wild grasses and successional landscape, numerous artifacts related to the railroad. Another photograph looking east towards Camden Road Bridge, and looking west, approaching the Randolph Street Bridge with the train on the left. And you see here the St. Pancras Way Bridge, crossing Camden Road Bridge, and just an assortment of images here that capture the character of the viaduct. And this is something that we're trying to leverage, something that we're trying to play with, not to erase it and make it picture perfect, but to actually work with some of these rougher, more industrial and train railroad related characteristics. There are multiple textures and materials and multiple structures associated with the line. And finally, there are significant constraints. Simon mentioned a few of them. The first is we need to get people safely up and off of the viaduct. It's about 8 to 9 meters up in the air. So how we actually work with stairs and elevators and create safe and welcoming and civic points of access is important. Secondly, Network Rail has numerous requirements. Perhaps most significantly is a very clear separation wall, what they call a separation wall, between the park and the active train lines. This needs to meet certain requirements in terms of security and safety and durability. We have certain planting restrictions. We're trying to create a green park, but we can't plant too close to the tracks. There is some contamination up there, ground contamination, that needs to be sorted out before we can make this a totally public place. We have a survey and we have a strategy for how to deal with this in a way that we can assure the public of health and safety standards. And we are constrained dimensionally. In the top photograph here, this is an aerial photograph of the stretch just by Camden Gardens and Camden Road. That's our widest area. It runs from about 10 to 17 meters in width. More typically, in the middle section, we're looking at about 6 to 8.5 meters. And in the last section, as you move towards York Way, there are a number of constrained dimensions there, typically 4 to 5 meters, with the occasional space where it really gets quite constrained. And you can see here just a typical section of what could be the park. This is shown at 5 meters width with a 2.5 meter high separation screen, and then the train line. And another more constrained situation where we have 2 walks at about 2 and 2.5 meters. And again, those need to work with existing network rail infrastructure. And that's this location here. So those constraints are important because everything that we're about to show you pays a good deal of respect and a good deal of learning from the community, from the characteristics of Camden, from all of the site constraints, from the history of the place, as well as its potential. At the scale of the master plan, the red line here indicates the length of the High Line that we're looking at. Runs from Kentish Town Road to York Way. It's about 1 kilometer and 1.2 kilometers. There are multiple communities in Camden Town, but also the Agar Grove Estate and Maiden Lane Estate, and more broadly, a number of surrounding communities too. We think Camden is a wonderful 15-minute walkable community from Camden Gardens. It's within a 15-minute walk radius. There's residential places to live, there's places to work, there's places to shop, there's access to parks like Regent's Park and to the canal. It's a wonderful center. And we see the High Line as ultimately helping to fulfill this vision for the Green Loop, or a pedestrian trail that would link the High Line and Camden and Kentish Town to Regent's Canal, to King's Cross, to Euston Station, to Regent's Park, to the zoo, and to the market. When you zoom in a little bit more, we're focused in here on the 1.2 kilometer length. You see Camden Gardens on the left. A 5-minute walk from Camden Gardens embraces a significant amount of the community. We see the project in 3 phases. This is tied to funding and construction implementation, but phase 1 would run from Camden Gardens to Camden Road, phase 2 from Camden Road to Camley Street, and phase 3 from Camley Street to York Way. What's interesting is that those phases are also keyed into what we would call 3 contexts. The sort of historical and cultural and heritage context of Camden and Camden Gardens, the residential sense of Agar Grove, and the residential, but also the more modernist architectural characteristics of the Maiden Lane estate, and the potential adjacency there in relationship to both the Tile Yards development and to King's Cross. We are aware of heritage and history. Of course, the first segment is in the Jeffrey Street Heritage Zone, paying a good deal of respect to the Victorian character, the mostly residential character, and the history and heritage of various features in that district. We see 4 primary access points and possibly a 5th. The first is at Camden Gardens, the second through Camden Road Station, the third at Camley Street, and the 4th at York Way. We see a 5th possibility that we'll show you at St. Pancras Way. We think this makes sense. Whether or not it's within our budget and it's feasible is another question, but we'd like to explore it, and that's the point that we're at the moment. Those connections or access points are interesting because they do connect north and south along primary streets. Camley Street connecting north along what will be the new Camley Street development and dropping down to the Coal Yards and King's Cross. Camden Road Station and Camden Gardens, of course, connecting into the communities both north and south. And one of our suggestions in the master plan is that those connections over time become more tree-lined, that we invest in street trees and try to create a more robust and continuous series of street tree canopies that don't only provide greenery and shade, but also help with the ecological robustness of the green system. And when you put those layers together, you get this diagram for the master plan, outlining the 3 phases, the 4 or 5 access points, and then what we're calling 4 character zones in terms of the design: the woodland balcony, the woodland catwalk, the rail yard gardens, and the wilds. And that's what we're excited to show you in more detail as we move along. And you've seen this image before. I think it's a very powerful, iconic image of what the ultimate vision here is, which is to connect Camden Town to King's Cross and beyond. And a bit of a close-up there where you see the various urban fabric and the urban adjacencies that the line moves through. A garden in the sky, but also something that speaks to environment, to climate, to ecology, to biodiversity, topics that have special urgency and special significance for our time. So onto the design approach. There's 5 general ideas at work before we go into the details of the design. The first is to view the design as being buildable or constructible out of what we'll call a kit of parts. That if we develop a material vocabulary, that this vocabulary can then be used to produce walkways, seating areas, areas where people can meet and have picnics, work with the screens, and so on. This kit of parts for the path dimension is queued into how we're trying to dimension the path. The minimum dimension for, according to building regulations, is 1.5 meters. We think that's a little lean on what would be a public walk. So the minimum that we are looking at is 1.8. We're generally working more with 2.1, and in some areas, 2.4 meters. This will ensure accessibility for everybody. The second component is a separation screen. We want this to be, it has to be robust, cannot be vandalized or broken or cut through or climbed over. But we also want it to be visually open. And this particular material allows us to do that in an interesting way, because when you look at this material obliquely in one direction, it's almost totally transparent. And when you look obliquely in the other direction, it's quite opaque. So you get a very different effect depending on from which angle you're looking through the screen. The screen is built at 2.5 meters high, which will assure network rail of the safety concerns here. And we give it a slight twist. You can see in the plan at the top, the panels actually twist in order to bring some variation and some variety to the screen as you walk along. This is sort of a view looking one way through the open transparency perspective and from the more opaque perspective. And what's interesting about this screen is that we can then use it in a number of different ways. We can cloak it with vines and greenery in some locations. We can use it for exhibits, in this case, a habitat exhibit, where we could exhibit various features related to ecology, to insects, to birds, or to educational information. Where we have some gardens, we could have gardeners' tools using the screen as a storage screen. And we like the idea in one location of creating a railway artifact screen where various artifacts of the railroad can be reappropriated and installed on the screen. There's other things the screen can do. It can be an art wall. It can be an interactive wall. We're trying to think of ways to program the screen so that it has variation as you walk along and it's not simply a fence. It becomes more like a gallery element. The third component are dynamic plantings and ecological systems. So we're trying to create as green and as robust and as dynamic an ecology as we can. We see the possibility for working with vegetational vocabulary so that it has seasonal interest in the winter, the spring, the summer, and the fall. But it also supports a diversity of wildlife, especially birds, insects, butterflies, and also can support community uses such as farming. One of the things that we're sort of looking at is a young woodland thematic, drawing on species like oak and hazel, ash, aspen. Also working with an English hedgerow thematic, very important for both screening and for habitat, working with hawthorn, field maple, hazel, and working with meadows, wildflower meadows, as well as more horticultural plantings, including typical things like foxglove or yarrow, deschampsia, purple moorgrass. These are all really beautiful settings, but they're important in terms of the biodiversity and the wildlife that they can support. And fourthly, also working with gardens and the potential for people in the community to work with gardens for food and for educational value. One of the issues here is soil. One strategy is to build a new layer of soil on the existing base. A second is to mound soil where we can, in order to have generous mounds of soil for larger plantings. And a third that we're very interested in is this idea of these bags, these habitat bags. It's very practical in terms of being able to bring material up onto the Highline. But when they're all put together, you can have used different substrates in the bags, which facilitate different plantings, which really is a big catalyst for maximum biodiversity. You can have acid soils and alkaline soils, clay soils and sandy soils, and that allows for a really rich mix of plantings in certain locations. The fourth element are a number of balconies and overlooks, and you'll see these in a bit more detail as we move through the scheme. And finally, dramatic stairs and thresholds. These are very important to make sure that these are welcoming, inviting, they are civic, they are generous, and they are safe. We have spoken about being able to open and close the Highline at certain times. So related to these stairs and thresholds and elevators are a number of gates and other mechanisms that allow us to safely close and safely reopen at different times. So onto the concept design in a bit more detail. We'll begin at Camden Gardens. You see in this photograph Camden Street meeting Kentish Town Road. The viaduct is going over. And in this plan, you can see the canal in the bottom, the gardens in the middle, Camden Street, Kentish Town Road. And importantly, you know, we recognize that the bulk of movement here to access the Highline will come from the south, will come from the canal and from the market. Sure, there'll be people in Kentish Town Road and people in the north that will be coming too, but the majority of movement coming from the south and from the passageway there, the Water Street access point over to the gardens. One suggestion we're making as part of the master plan is to retreat the surface here of Kentish Town Road and the surrounding sidewalks around the gardens with new paving in order to make this a shared street or a social surface. So it's less about speeding cars and buses, and it's more about mixing pedestrians and bicyclists with vehicular traffic in a safe and secure way, but with a new paving treatment that highlights and prioritizes the pedestrian. You'll also notice in this image the gray areas in the middle. Those are the arches that are open in Camden Gardens. And this plan here details those too. You can see a zebra crossing from Waterway into the gardens, east-west, and the idea of a shared street on Kentish Town Road. And then here you see the three arches being appropriated. The one on the right for a new stair and access point, Tatiana will describe. In the middle is like a community table. It's really a very long civic table for the community to meet and have picnics and have events. And in the smaller arch on the right is another facility with flexible uses yet to be determined. Tatiana, will you describe the access point here at Camden Gardens?
Thanks, Jim. So I think what's very important for the access points is that both the stairs and the lifts are not just a means of getting from A to B, but they're really special, dramatic elements that are a part of the experience of the High Line itself. And I think one theme that's become apparent to us is that they allow us to have views of parts of the historic structures of the High Line that aren't normally accessible. And they also serve as a very important transition from the very fast, busy life of the street to a kind of slower, gentler pace of the High Line itself. So as Jim mentioned, we have the majority of people coming from the south. We also have a lot of people coming from the north. So our proposal has a stair that addresses both the north and the south of the arch. It runs from north to south through the arch on the western side. And in this slide, you can see the three arches a bit more zoomed in, showing how they're differently occupied. So the western arch would have the stair, which comes up onto a kind of large landing or balcony, which becomes the roof of a kiosk, a large kiosk underneath. And so from the top of the roof, you would experience the underside of the arch and the kind of interesting brickwork there. And underneath, you could buy a sandwich or a drink, a coffee or a soft drink, and go and sit at the communal table in the central arch, which remains open and allows still a passageway through. I would also say that the kiosk is open to the side, so again you can kind of pass through on either side of the kiosk. And then the arch on the east has a sort of ancillary space in the north narrow part of the arch, and in the wider south part of the arch is a smaller, potentially cafe for ice creams and so forth. So as you come up the stairs, you then pass over the roof of the kiosk and up a smaller stair to a small landing, which would provide interesting views in the kind of treetops of the mature trees at Camden Gardens, which are quite special. And then this then brings you up to a catwalk, a metal catwalk that sits alongside the masonry structure of the High Line. And the lift also, we actually imagine the lift to be quite open. You would have views, changing views of the trees as you rise up through the lift, also brings you up to this catwalk structure. The catwalk means that we don't need to pierce through the masonry of the High Line. And it also allows for views of details of the kind of architraves and things of the viaduct that you wouldn't normally get close to, and also some quite long views north over the treetops up towards Kentish Town. So then visitors would come along the catwalk and enter actually at the point of the metal bridge, where we can remove some of the metal panels which are not structural, and that way we access the High Line. And you can see in this view from the north, you can see the kiosk with the landing on top, the table in the middle, and the smaller filled-in arch towards the east. And this is the other side, showing a really generous 3.5 meter kind of civic stair that pulls you up onto this first major access point to the High Line.
Thank you, Tatiana. I think this is really exciting because the stair is really quite theatrical, isn't it? It brings you through the arch and then out into the canopy of the trees, and then turns you around back towards the masonry of the top of the viaduct, walks you along that, and then brings you on over Kentish Town Road. So it's really a very, very beautiful idea. New elevation. Now, when you come up there, you then come on to what we're calling the first phase of the project, which is between Camden Street and Camden Road. And you see here on this aerial photograph the existing conditions, and in red is traced the new walkway. And this is an illustrative version of that walkway with a number of experiences along the way set within the woodland. In this more detailed plan, you can see on the left, the entry balcony brings you on over Camden Street. At that location, we would have a wayfinding screen and a viewing deck. The line in purple, we call it the artifact screen. That's where the screen will have the railroad artifacts. At Prowse, over Prowse Place, over the tunnel there, we would have an overlook, we call Prowse Point, and also an entrance onto the platform. Moving to the right, we see a series of social seating opportunities inside a newly planted woodland. So this sort of axonometric is, you see in the left, lower left, it's Camden Gardens. You see the stair on the left going underneath the arch, through the arch, up onto the balcony, up onto the top side now of the Highline. We have this large sort of seating overlook that allows people to look both east and west along the line from an elevated perspective. And then a variety of seating opportunities inside a really lushly planted woodland. As you move east towards Camden Road, you can see a number of other features. We have a seating grandstand, an event space with movable tables and chairs, another platform entry onto Camden Road Station platform, a balcony that juts out to look into Royal College Street, and then a catwalk across the bridge to the eastern edge there. This view is looking at Royal College Street. This is the bridge that goes over Royal College Street, and the overlook there over the top of that building, and the platform to the train is in the middle. This is a section, it just gives you a sense of the dimension or the scale of the space and the plantings. And another one in relationship to the platform and the trains. I mean, I think there's generous enough dimension here to create a really beautiful woodland that you feel immersed within, but at the same time, you have the opportunity to watch trains going by and to access the platform. This is up near a view taken near Royal College Street, with again showing how you can sit in the shade of trees and have a really tactile sense, a real quality of tactility, of wildness and of nature, and a place here where you can watch the trains go by. This is a quick illustration of the idea of the artifact screen, where we could attach various pieces of railroad history, railroad heritage, and make that into a really interesting gallery-like feature. Very tactile, very interesting objects. And further along is that seating grove inside the trees, pruning the trees high so that you get very clear sight lines through to the chimney pots and to the context, but a really extraordinary place to sit and meet friends. And also at the same time have access on and off the platform from this location. And this is the crossing at the Camden Road Bridge. We would take a third of the bridge and build a big planter and use that planter to have biodiverse plantings that can also grow over the edge onto the outside face of the bridge, and use the other third for a new walkway, catwalk, and leave the other third open to let light down to the street below, as well as let people experience and see the artifact itself. at the Royal College Street Camden Road intersection, as part of the master plan, we're proposing or exploring at least the treatment of that triangular square to try to again work with a single surface treatment with new paving to prioritize and highlight people over cars and buses. And just at Camden Road Station, an important access point here that Tatiana will say a few things about.
So currently the proposal for Camden Road Station it's still in negotiation with Transport for London. There have been some early discussions with them and other bodies who are concerned with the station. But the current proposal is to share the existing stair and lift up to platform 2, and then to open up the barriers to the platform up to the High Line, so that you'd be able to come up to the platform and then access the High Line. So this would be the route through. The ticket barriers we would be proposing to remove the ticket barriers and to install contactless Oyster card touch points. So you would come through on the ground floor here, through the corridor, as you do normally, to platform 2. There's the platform 2 lift, brings you up onto the platform, and then there would be immediately 2 entrances into the High Line, one by the lift and one by the top of the stairs. And then there would actually be a further exit at the western end, which Jim mentioned earlier. But this platform actually runs almost to Camden Gardens. And what becomes interesting with this western opening is that it then would provide a direct access from the platform from Camden Road Station down to Camden Gardens, obviously only from platform 2. But I think that would be a really interesting a new entrance to Camden Road Station, which obviously would probably have to be closed at dusk along with the rest of the park. But during the daytime, it would give you this extra access. So as I say, this is still still in negotiation, and but I think it could be a good solution for access at this point.
And so this plan here summarizes what we have described as a series of walkways, new plantings, new access points, and really, the transformation of this section, this first phase, in a way that I think is very exciting and very transformative. We call it the woodland balcony. Moving east, we move on to what we call the woodland catwalk. We call it the catwalk because you can see in this aerial photograph the open bridges that span Camden Road, Randolph Street, and St. Pancras Way. So you have an open bridge, a piece of land, an open bridge, a piece of land, and an open bridge before you get back onto a piece of land. So it's really about these bridges that are very closely spaced together. We're trying to create a different kind of woodland here than what we had in the first section, and a variety of experiences as you move along. A place where you can meet and sit, creating a new habitat screen for greenery and for habitat along the separation screen. A bridge catwalk across the open bridge at Randolph Street. A variety of bird houses and habitats that we're creating as part of a hedgerow vocabulary. Crossing the bridge at Baines and St. Pancras. This is a section that gives you a sense of the dimension that we have, and an image here that gives you a good sense of the character, a lot more natural. It's really about people strolling, having opportunities to sit in fairly naturalized settings. And then moving across the bridges and onto the bridge. And in this case, leaving the bridge exposed as an artifact, as a found object. and being able to go across that and experience it for what it is, and to see the trains go by at a higher elevation. At St. Pancras Way, Bain Street, this intersection, one of the things we're proposing is to increase the curb so that we have a little bit more area there for people, for safety, but also to create a potential fifth access point here, a new stair that Tatiana can say a few things about, please.
So as Jim said, this is not in the original proposal, so we don't necessarily have a budget for this stair yet. Nevertheless, many of you may be aware of the large number of new developments that are scheduled for along St. Pancras Way, which either have just received planning or are currently going through planning, being designated by the council for development. And I think that, you know, St. Pancras Way is going to really be a sort of quite transformed route through down to King's Cross. So we felt that it was important to make a study for an access point here. You can see it's a very interesting crossing point. There's the amazing bridges overhead. It's very sort of large masonry pier underneath, but the pavement is very, very narrow. And so, you know, really and where it crosses, where it overlaps with the High Line is even more narrow. So we are proposing to pull the pavement out. Of course, all subject to discussions with highways. There is not really enough space for a lift at this point, and there's also budgetary issues around the lift here. But it's something that's, you know, up for discussion, I think. The stair itself has to be quite narrow in order to fit on this narrow bit of pavement, and it would rise up sort of through the girders, which would be actually quite a dramatic access point, and it would hug that kind of masonry structure. The foot of the stair lands at the widest part of the street, and there you can see it kind of piercing up through the structure. And we would hope that we could hang it off the structure so that we can keep the underside open, not need to have structure coming down and cluttering the street. And I do actually think it's a really nice access point, and it would be quite an interesting addition to the scheme.
So moving on from that location, from St. Pancras Way to Camley Street, you can see in this aerial photograph the existing conditions. In red is the designed layout, and here you have an illustrative plan. We're calling this the Railway Gardens, and this is really in response to the fact that this is really a mostly residential community that has expressed an interest in both gardening, allotment gardens, but also places for children and places for families. So here we're looking at a sort of a nature classroom, a series of allotment gardens, a screen for garden tools, a play area with seating. And as you move further west, more gardens, an orchard, an overlook at Camley Street, and an event space on an existing structure just by the north-south rail track there. This is a section, again, giving you a sense of the scale, and also some tighter spaces here. This is just 4.8 meters. And a sort of a quick view showing the characteristics of this space with allotment garden plots with kale and tomatoes and vegetables and flowers and orchard trees. The possibility for honeybees, birds, pollinators, other sorts of things that come with biodynamic gardens. And in the play area, you see the possibility to have a big log feature where children could play, a green arbor where children can run through and run around. The arbor itself could be pretty dramatic and beautiful and special in terms of its experience. And the screen here could be painted in a very colorful way to bring color, a sense of fun, sense of playfulness to the play area in this location. And moving east through the orchard towards the event space is a new access point being studied at Camley Street. And Tatiana, say a few words about this.
So many of you probably know that Camley Street is in the early design stages of a new development, quite large new development. And so the proposal that we're going to show here is in some ways a placeholder, because we don't yet know exactly how there will be public space here at some part near the High Line, but we don't exactly know how it will be configured or where exactly it will be. This is the current state of it. Feedback that Philippa at Street Space were having was that this little stair, the green stair, which currently provides basically a link from Maiden Lane over the ground level railway down to Camley Street, it feels unsafe, particularly late at night, and is very kind of unwelcoming. But it does provide this quite interesting view over the ground level railway, which for train spotters is of some value. And this just shows currently the plan configuration. So our proposal is basically to replace that stair, but with something much more welcoming and generous and inviting, a wider straight run of steps, which would have still an overlook across the ground level railway at that point as you reach the top. There'd also be a large lift and a balcony, providing some kind of overlook onto a potential public square below. And so people arriving by the lift would arrive past the balcony, and people coming up the stair would see the railway below. And this point, since it's currently open 24 hours, may be retained open 24 hours, but with massively improved lighting. And in the fullness of time, with the development at Camley Street, it should be much better surveyed. There'll be potentially buildings which overlook that route, and I hope that it will feel much safer and a much better way of linking the two sides together.
And finally, moving west along past the Maiden Lane estate, we call this the Wilds. Again, the idea is to play on some of what we've heard from the community about places to experience nature, but also in an educational setting. So the Wilds is conceived of as a sort of journey through a series of exhibits and outdoor classrooms and experiences that are cued into the idea of wild nature in the city. You can see here the aerial photograph with the layout, and this section in the west, and this section in the east. I should mention, sorry, in the west, we are looking to extend out across the existing Maiden Lane sports pitch to actually incorporate that into the space of the High Line, and to extend some more connections out into the community there, where they can more easily access the sports pitch as well as the High Line itself. And then this is the layout moving to the east to York Way. And there's an access point at that location too. So here, moving back to the sports pitch, you see a sort of a habitat exhibit, an avian exhibit, an insect exhibit, an ecological pond exhibit. The idea is a series of ecological exhibits that will be of significant educational value along this stretch of promenade. The screen is used to create a variety of habitat screens, as well as a habitat for wildlife. So you can see here a typical section. It's not always that generous. It's a little tight, 4.8 meters, but there is significant greenery on the northern side, and that too becomes a borrowed landscape that we can borrow and use as part of the experience here. And this is the general idea, sort of a wildness. We want to create exhibits for learning, for children of all ages to come and touch and have a sense of touch and tactility, as well as learning about natural systems in the city. This is a sort of a view. You can see a series of habitat installations on the separation screen, a series of birdhouses, the creation of a pond with frogs and toads, and a sort of an aquatic experience. And a close-up here with the insect nests and the habitat nests tied to the screen, that have, artistic and cultural value, as well as educational and habitat value. And we're even looking at bats. Bats are an important member of the urban community in terms of the biodiversity that they support. So looking also here at a series of bat houses and bat habitat. And getting finally to York Way with a new courtyard and a beautiful new access point that will help people connect to York Way, to the tile yards, and to King's Cross. Tatiana.
So we're quite excited about this final access point, which is very, very close to the top of King's Cross development. And the existing kind of ruin, which is actually the wall of this old building that was once Maiden Lane Station. You can see here the ruin, you can see the bricked up old windows. And we're proposing really to retain the ruin as a kind of almost like a folly, but to open up those bricked up windows and to use the existing wall as a kind of protection from the noise and traffic of York Way, to create this kind of courtyard walled garden with a large gate at one end, which could be closed at dusk, and to have a kind of quite a slow stair coming up with a large landing at the first window and a small balcony at the higher up window, so that when you're walking past on the street, you can sort of see that there's something going on there. You can see that there's a stair with people passing up. And within the courtyard, there could be a kiosk serving, again, kind of coffees and sandwiches. And again, a really nice lift with open views, so that you experience this kind of folly-like structure, which we imagine being quite kind of overplanted as well, to bring you up onto the High Line. So we think this, in a way, this is a sort of view of it, is quite a nice end to the route, and we're quite excited about this little courtyard.
Thank you, and I really like this image because it conveys what we're trying to do throughout, which is to really mix or to blend or to collage the new features of the new High Line Park and access points, but to collage them in with existing materials, existing features, existing characteristics. It's a beautiful, beautiful image, I think. So with that, we conclude. Remember, please, that this is a very big and a very complex project. There's a lot of technical things we have to resolve, as well as permissions and approvals. But it's a very, I think, transformative project in terms of North London. It's an extraordinary green thread. It's a big piece of green infrastructure. It will do a lot in terms of biodiversity and environment, as well as building community and strengthening connectivity and mobility in this area. And what we've tried to conjure up and color up for you is a range of experiences, a diverse range of experiences for people of all ages and all backgrounds. These are things that we've heard from the community that they would like to see, the kinds of things they would like to come up and be able to do. I think that we've tried to reflect what we've heard in the design work to date. Finally, I would just add that this is an evolving project. None of this is fixed. We are using this meeting to make this presentation, but also to solicit feedback and input. And we will use that feedback and input for the next iteration that we hope to present again in September or October, before ultimately finalizing the details and taking it to planning in December. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your attention. We look forward to your questions and comments and feedback. And I'll pass it now back to Simon.
Thank you very much, Jim and Tatiana. That was there's some stuff in there I haven't seen before, which I thought was really very exciting. Thank you very much. Okay, so there's a whole load of comments and questions that have come through in the chat, and no doubt some will come through an email later on. Some of the questions I think got answered as we went through, so I'll leave out things like where the access points are and stuff like that. But as if I just skip through some of these questions and answer the quick ones that I can, and then maybe you can pick up some of the others, Jim and Tatiana. I think the sort of, you know, suggestions that are coming through about materials and stuff, I think we just absorb those, and they probably don't need particular responses. And I think that, you know, there's some really lovely comments and suggestions in there that I think we will just absorb and see how feasible they are. But let me just start a few that I've picked up here already. So Dilip made what I thought was a really nice comment at the beginning about love to see some train spottery, live signage about train type, class wagons and so on. I mean, I don't know how feasible that is, because the freight trains, you don't often know what on earth's going on in all those containers. But there is, of course, live train information coming from the London Overground. It would be nice to be able to incorporate that and know what you're looking at. If that were feasible, I think that would be a lovely idea. Sheila asked about how will it be maintained. I mentioned at the beginning that we're trying to raise an endowment specifically to fund the maintenance in perpetuity. The New York Highline, for example, apparently employs 140 people. We will never be able to get to that kind of level, but and they're a much bigger entity than we will be. But the idea is that the charity that we've established will do the maintenance. Camden will adopt it as a park, they say, so they'll close it and open it at dawn and dusk in the way they do parks generally, which helps with the security. But maintenance is going to be down to us. And the access point questions you asked there, Sheila, I think have been answered. But it's Kentish Town Road, Camden Road Station. Possibly St Pancras Way, although that's an optional one that wasn't in the original brief. Camley Street and York Way. Jack asks, can you feel the vibrations underfoot when the trains are moving past you? Interestingly, although when you're underneath the viaduct, you can really sense the trains when they go overhead. When you're up there next to them, they're far less intrusive than you expect, and they're quite nice things to sort of watch. It's not like intercity trains, they trundle past, as those would know. So I think there's been a lot of talk about incorporating the trains in some way into what happens up there, and I actually think that's a really nice thing. So, you know, you can't miss a train when it comes past you, but you can still talk in a normal way when you're walking along there. Or maybe that's just those of us with loud voices. Anyway, so, and Dilip mentioned about baffling noise, and I think, you know, we think the train shouldn't be completely hidden, because they're there, and let's face it, they'd be quite hard to miss completely. Peter Darley asks an impossible question, which is so unlike you, Peter. Can you describe how a pedestrian who enjoys the High Line and descends at Camden Gardens will avoid a strong sense of disappointment at being thrust into the highly urban and very busy canal environment? No idea how that, but you know, I would just comment that you can be in a tranquil park and then leave it. And the High Line will be no different to that. I don't think we can change Camden Town or York Way, Peter, but it would be nice if we had some impact on the surrounding environment. Sheila mentioned about a hedgerow. Will the hedgerow be on the fence side or the train side? It'll have to be on the High Line side, because we couldn't have sort of loose growing plants on the train side. And anyway, we're trying to get that wall, the separating wall, as close to the trains as we're allowed, because obviously that gives us maximum space for people and plants and so on. So actually you'll be confronted with the plants a lot more than you would if you're on the train side. Sheila makes some good points about shrubbery around Regent's Park and so on. And picks up the point about pedestrians and bikes. I mean, we wrestle with this simply because there's particularly that York Way end, there's no space for segregated cycle lanes. You just won't be able to do that. And I know from experience of going to events locally that there's quite a strong anti-cycling sentiment. I'm sure there's some very keen cyclists on this call, but people, I think, locally do often feel that the canal has been lost to them by, should we say, the lycra cyclists. We're not going to be able to police it. But I think you can see the way the designs are being suggested that it's not going to be the sort of speeding cycle route anyway. And because we can't segregate them, I don't see it as being a particularly useful route for cyclists. It's also quite a long way to lug your bike up. But that's to be determined. Matt one was saying they like the fence idea. Lighting, the way to use the bridge to activate at street level and tell a bigger story with lighting overspill and planting and so on. I think we like the idea too that you can see and you feel the High Line's presence even when you're not on it, but near it. I think that could be good for all sorts of reasons. Sarah asked about a ramp and an elevator. This is more an engineering question for Jim or Tatiana, but I think ramps are going to be tricky just because of how far you've got to travel and how they have to be incredibly steep and how little space we've got to play with a lot of the ground areas. But absolutely lifts the access points for all the obvious reasons, and we wouldn't get through planning without considering that sort of access. Dilip mentions compost heaps. I think the wilding point, the wilds. Covered some of that, but I'll leave Jim if you want to pick up on that if he wants to. And Gerard makes the good point that one of the things that really made New York a success was the high quality of the design. And perhaps we haven't dwelt on this, but Jim designed the New York High Line. That isn't the only reason we hired him. We hired him because he has a fantastic team of people around him as well. But I think we really do understand that. We want it to be amazing and we want it to stay amazing. And that's why we've got such an amazing team of people doing this bit of work. I'm going to stop there, I think. I don't know, Jim, if you wanted to pick up some of those points about the wilding and biodiversity points, while I have another scroll through and see if there's any immediate questions that we can pick up. Is that okay?
No, I think those are all very good points. I mean, you're right about maintenance. These are living environments and they do need a lot of care and attention. And we are trying to be responsive to that, thinking about materials that are durable and robust. And very easy to maintain, thinking about plantings that kind of will take care of themselves. There will typically be an intense year or two while you're getting things established and looking after the plantings. But hopefully once they're established, they'll be relatively low maintenance. So we're aware of that, but inevitably maintenance is part of it. And one of the things that we're excited about, and this is very different from the New York High Line, is the interrelationship between the community and this High Line. That the community has expressed a lot of interest in being hands-on, in being involved, in working with it. And so the stewardship the maintenance, and the evolving character of the thing as people want to see and do different things. All of that is part of our thinking.
Tatiana, do you want to pick up any of those points that were raised in the chat?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point about ramps and lifts, usually on almost all the access points, the ground area is very small, so ramps wouldn't be possible. They need to be very shallow to be accessible, and that would make them very, 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 very long. But we do want lifts to be really special. We don't want them to just be a sort of secondary access, sort of in the shadow of the stair. And we're looking at kind of materials where lifts could be quite open. As you travel up them, you would get these extraordinary views, and they would be large, generous access lifts. They wouldn't be kind of small, something you have to wait for ages to get onto or whatever. So, those are very important things for us.
Good stuff. And Peter Darley's just picked up in the chat about his question that I was perhaps a little too scathing about. Sorry, Peter. And he was referring to the green loop idea and the way in which the Highline picks up that. And I take your point, Peter. I would hope that one of the things the Highline does is brings to life more of the pedestrian routes across the whole area and helps us think about the way our town centres join up to each other and how they interact with the communities around them without being quite as urban as things have been in the past. But we'll see if that transpires. People have mentioned various things about the Promenade Plantain in Paris. And public artworks. I think those are all sorts of things that we can consider. And I think the way in which Jim and Tatiana have designed some of the spaces are that they can be different things at different times. And so we can use them obviously at different times of year, but for different things throughout. Good. I think we've probably covered most of the stuff. Sorry, there's so many comments there. I'm not sure I've picked them all up, but we'll go through the chat afterwards and try and pick up anything that we haven't answered tonight.
Are they positive, Simon?
Positive? They are really positive. Well, there's a few comments. Someone's made the point about the Marble Arch Mound, which is getting an awful lot of bad press at the moment, as did the Garden Bridge, of course.
We are not going to make
we're not making the mound. I mean, I think one of the differences, we're not building something from scratch here. This is a bit about reusing a bit of existing infrastructure that's currently not being used. And we hope, we're giving ourselves a lot more time than they gave themselves to build the Marble Arch Mound. Marble Arch Mound. And of course, that's very temporary. I think that's going to be gone, isn't it, by Christmas? So no, we hope to be around a lot longer than that. Oh, and actually, there was a question earlier on about Network Rail's freight strategy. Sorry, I've forgotten who asked it. There was a report published a couple of weeks ago. We think that's a kind of 30-year time horizon for Network Rail. It's basically about, you could turn this into a siding for freight train. It doesn't go anywhere at either end, so it could be a siding. We have a heads of terms negotiation with Network Rail at the moment that would have to take that into account, and it would be a 25-year lease. So if they did ever get there, and of course it would be an incredibly expensive thing to do, because you'd have to rebuild all of these bridges, as they were planning to do for those of us who have been around a while, when they were thinking about using this stretch to link High Speed 2 to High Speed 1. It was going to involve rebuilding all those bridges. It will be a massive undertaking for a relatively small advantage. So whilst it's an option, and everything that we do here has to be thought of in Network Rail terms as temporary. Some of us will be dead by the time they get around to doing some of these things, but that's how they obviously have to think in those longer timescales. We don't think that's going to upset our plans. And yes, it would all be designed to be taken away again should it ever need to be, which is someone else's point about recycling. I'm just looking at the chat again. There's lots of really lovely positive comments there, by the way, Jim. Some really it's great that people are sort of feeling excited about it, as are we, of course. And I have to say, my experience of doing this is obviously people have their thoughts and ideas about what they do and don't want, but the sort of overwhelming sense of excitement about this is something that whenever you talk to people really comes across. It's I think we're all really looking forward to it. Can't wait for it to actually happen. By the way, which reminds me, in order to make it happen, we have to raise a lot of money. So please don't forget about those contacts you may know. Help us access those. I think that's particularly important. Matteo is asking a couple of questions there. I'm not sure about. Oh, the Camden Sculpture Park. Oh, Matteo, are you Michael? Are you Michael from Flaxton Patouche? Is that who Matteo is? Because he's asked about the Camden Sculpture Park. And if it is Michael, then you'll know that Michael submitted a suggestion. We had a competition. We got some money for Camden Gardens, and Michael's idea for the sculpture park wasn't selected for various reasons. But yes, they know all about that. I think that's probably as much as I can answer at the moment. And sorry, Matty, I don't understand your point about the alphabet. Oh, I see. That's about reusing the stuff if it has to be used for other purposes. Okay, good. Yeah, trying to live answer chats is perhaps not the most entertaining way of spending an evening. I'm just going to pause there just to see if William, who is controlling things in the background, needs to add anything, or indeed Roisin, who's trying to pick up all this, needs to say anything else. But if not, I'm inclined to say we are about at an end. Matteo, you're not Michael. My apologies. Good. As no one else has said anything, it remains for me to thank Jim and Tatiana for all the work they've been doing. They have got so much further along this than I have to say I thought they would have done by now. There's still an awful lot of work to do, as you can see, not least to incorporate some of the suggestions and thoughts that we've had from this evening, and we're getting all the time from the consultation that we're doing. Please do continue to support us. Sign up for the newsletter. You can do that via the website. Follow us on Twitter and all the usual things. And like I say, think about who you know who could help us pay for it. Do you want to say anything in closing, Jim or Tatiana?
No, I think you did a very good job there, Simon. I would just reiterate that this is an enormously exciting project, and the vision, I think, is exciting, but it is not easy. There's still a long way to go. So, what we really need is support, political support, ideological support, community support, as well as financial support to make it a reality.
And I just want to say thank you so much, everyone who came along tonight and to listen. And please do send your comments. We will take them on board. We will read them. We will consider them. And they're very important to us in the design process.
Yeah. Yes.
Great stuff. I thought Jim's comments about support on all those levels was very pertinent. And of course, from a man who knows how to do these things, he's done it before. Thank you all very much for coming. Please do keep the comments coming in. We'll try and answer as much as we can later via Q&A, as we did last time for those who came to the last one of these. And we look forward to seeing you all in the autumn when we've progressed things even further and hopefully started to raise some money. Who do you know? Thanks for your time.